A little over a year ago, Kevin Feige called an audible and said Ant-Man 3 would be the start of Phase 5 of the MCU. The last few films in the Marvel IP underperformed, and the thought behind the call is that Phase 5 meant a fresh start. But instead of a fresh start, we got more wet farts. And from the $400 million tank job that was Ant-Man 3 to the turd that wouldn't flush with the Marvels, the former MCU audience collectively said,
"Bye-bye, bitch."
With the writer and actor strike causing delays and the travesty that was the Marvel's box office receipts, Disney only has one MCU movie coming out in 2024, and only because it's Deadpool 3 with Wolverine. Basically, a license to print money. That's what the MCU used to be in general, but 2023 showed that was now a distant memory. Phase 5 had some decent output, meaning Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and that's pretty much it. And that felt completely separated from the rest of the MCU as it was a conclusion to its own trilogy. In general, Phase 5 picked up right where Phase 4 left off, having the world singing its praises.
That shit is a 2-pack of ass. The fuck are you talking about? That shit stinks.
Phase 5 is just Phase 4, Part 2, because it still sucks. I put together a 2-part series of my reviews for Phase 4, and with just Deadpool 3 coming out, this seems like a perfect breaking point for a Part 1 of Phase 5. I'm starting the video off with the last couple shows since I haven't talked about them yet, and I'm saving Echo for Part 2 because I binged Loki and What If, and I think 2023 is a good cutoff. And I know I needed an MCU break or I was going to need therapy.
I may be a white boy, but I'm not stupid.
If you enjoyed What If Season 1, then you'll like this one too. But in my opinion, this is mostly superfluous fun where people get to smash their toys together. It's basically what might happen if certain elements of MCU canon were altered. Characters end up as other heroes in other groups and factions and lives. It exists to create possibilities for meaningless connections in future MCU movies or shows. Like, oh hey, that's the T'Challa from episode 1 of What If Season 2. I know we're literally talking about superheroes and magic and shit, but that doesn't change what the show is. There are 9 episodes with varying storylines. Some parts of the final episodes connect to Loki Season 2. So the seeds are planted for bite-sized connective pieces that don't and won't really amount to much. These are multiversal variants after all. But if you'd like a distraction, the animation style remains top-notch and some of the original actors voice their roles, so kudos for continuity. If that's appealing or you're an absolutely die-hard MCU fan that doesn't care what they're putting out, in which case I'm wondering why you're watching this video, by all means have at it and check out What If. But with the entire MCU being overly stuffed with uninteresting mind rot, think of the concept and reconsider if What If is worth it to you. Loki Season 2 isn't a bright spot so much as a damp blanket. It has one job and it's frustrating to watch it fail at that. As much as Feige repeated that we wouldn't have to watch the TV shows to know what's going on in the movies, like LeBron's hairline, that has proven to be a lie. The second season of Loki exists so we can get a better understanding of how the multiverse works. If you still care at all, that is. But I found its plot and world building to be overly convoluted, and world building feels so pointless when everything's going to change and not really matter in the end anyway. Judging by the box office numbers of the last several movies, maybe the MCU really does end earlier than even its most ardent critics could have predicted. I'll give a simplified version of the plot because from the numbers, not a lot of people who watched, say, Endgame are watching Loki Season 2, so this should do the trick. We pick up where the first season left off. Loki, played by Tom Hiddleston, and Mobius, played by Owen Wilson, playing himself, are trying to find Sylvie, aka Lady Loki, after she killed He Who Remains and caused an untold number of timelines to branch out from the sacred timeline. It's basically a race against time to stop this thing, the temporal loom, from overloading and thus destroying everything, and He Who Remains, aka fucking Kang the Conqueror, that's what everyone's going to call him, so I'll just make it easy. He had a plan in place to be resurrected. To thwart his plan and prevent catastrophe, they have to do lots of fetch quests and side missions over the course of 6 episodes, with an unfulfilling end that leaves things open if actors decide to re-sign, or if they successfully get through their contracts without an assault charge. To be fair to Loki as a production, the show is well made from a technical standpoint, and the actors do some of the best work in the MCU post-Endgame. I know that doesn't sound like much, but it's genuinely good. Most MCU productions have a similar feel in aesthetic, pace, and humor. These 6 episodes have a more serious tone while maintaining that signature Marvel humor, for better or worse. To give credit where it's due again, I didn't find it overbearing here at all. In fact, because of the more dramatic nature of the show, it was actually used pretty conservatively, and the best thing I can say about it is, it didn't fucking annoy me. That's huge for the MCU. The camera work is also noticeably good, not something that's really apparent in these cookie cutter productions. Usually they all look pretty great, but aren't unique. Here there's restraint in moving the camera around instead of it being frantic and choppy like you'd expect from the superhero genre. As far as the acting goes, Hiddleston is impressive with how he's been able to add wrinkles to Loki and evolve the character the best he could with the clunky trash he's had to work with from season 1 on. And like I said, Owen Wilson plays himself, so take that however you want. If you like him, you'll like that. If you don't, well, you won't. They give Mobius some depth with his own little arc throughout the show, but he remains one note because of Wilson. It is what it is. Sophia DiMartino is good as Sylvie, and the show thankfully avoids turning her into the hero of the story, like so much other post-Endgame drivel. A big problem with this season of Loki was the same as the first. The multiverse concept is so tired and played out already that it's difficult to care. Especially when the plot devices grow and grow, it makes it hard to keep up. The show at least handles the deaths of untold numbers of people and living things better than Guardians of the Galaxy 3 did. Remember that? When the High Evolutionary obliterated an entire planet and they were just kind of like the group equivalent of the shrug emoji about it?
What kind of monster slaughters a civilization?
Where are Mantis and Drax?
I don't know!
In this show, they're watching a screen where a virtual display of the timelines are disintegrating, and the emotional weight is sold effectively enough. Meanwhile, in Guardians 3, a planet was destroyed right beneath their feet, and they were just like,
I don't give a fuck.
Fair enough.
Don't give a fuck.
So give Loki some credit for that. You can't talk about this show without mentioning the swinging elephant in the room, Jonathan Majors, who filmed his scenes before getting arrested for assault. Hey, at least Vince McMahon's around to take some of the spotlight off him.
Leave before The Rock leaves. Come here for a second. Rock wants to tell you one thing.
Jonathan Majors as Victor Timely here in Loki is fine, but his entire thing was overhyped from the start. I'll refer you to my Ant-Man 3 review in this video, which I put out when the movie dropped last year, and I called it then. The guy was getting credit for nothing in particular. He wasn't terribly compelling as Kang or here as Timely. And to be fair, it could be the work he was given, but it doesn't look like he'll be given anything additional either, so who gives a shit. The show leaves it open for him to continue as the big bad for the multiverse saga or leave it here. Now that the assault charges are final, we know the answer to that. Whether the MCU continues with Kang or not, it doesn't change that they're asking a lot from an audience who's grown tired of their shenanigans. The MCU is so vast at this point that it's hard to keep up with. Then throw in the multiverse where nothing seems to matter and you have a frustrating viewing experience. I predict a complete reboot on the horizon for the MCU. And the convoluted mess that is the multiverse is one of many reasons, but it's a major one. I don't think Iron Man or Captain America or Spider-Man could lead us through this multiverse saga and keep it entertaining. Then leave it to DEI choice heroes like Captain Marvel and you're doomed. In the end, we have what is most likely the final season of Loki that's aesthetically pleasing, overall well acted, but is hampered by a convoluted multiverse plot. Hey, at least Loki doesn't get kicked in the nuts again.
But everywhere I go, people tell me the same thing.
Thank you, Spider-Man!
You know, guys, there was a point while sitting in the theater watching Quantamania when I feared the intrusive thoughts were going to win. I learned two things from watching this movie. For one, don't see this movie in 4DX unless you want to have the same experience as Rihanna's baby during the Super Bowl. And two, I think Ant-Man loves when his daughter's in peril so he can shout for her.
Cassie. I'm coming, Cassie. Cassie! 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 I love you, Peanut. Cassie! Cassie!
I probably couldn't have lower expectations when it comes to an Ant-Man movie, so his third solo outing turning into an unfunny, cringe-inducing, single-serving piece of trash was surprising. You might notice I sound a little different. I contracted some sort of illness after seeing the movie, and it's fair to assume I got it in the theater, but getting sick from watching Quantumania sounds about right. It's like every Marvel film the past 12 months has teased a return to form, which is then followed promptly by a "Gotcha, bitch!" And surprise, it's shit. Ant-Man 3's the longest 2 hours of your life, hampered by a boring script about a generic affair with a bland, unfunny sense of humor. Jokes being forced is a pretty standard MCU criticism, but it's even more egregious here because of the comedic pedigree of Paul Rudd, whose talents in that department are wasted despite his best efforts. Ant-Man 3 also proves why you can't have most of the existing characters in the MCU as our lead heroes. I have absolutely nothing against the character of Ant-Man, but he's a side character. Just like Shang-Chi, not Iron Man, not Black Panther, and not Black Widow, and not Captain America. There's a reason that Spider-Man, Iron Man, Wolverine, Hulk, and that ilk are the face of Marvel and the main characters in every form of Marvel Universe media. Because they're the most compelling ones. Ant-Man isn't gonna do it for me, and neither is MODOK. As an audience member, I was far more open to watching Ant-Man or giving Guardians of the Galaxy a try because I trusted what Marvel was doing based on how well they were handling the main characters. Films like Ant-Man acted as supplemental material to the bigger overall narrative that the main characters kept me invested in. We simply don't have that now, and the smartest move for Marvel is to get to the Fantastic Four and X-Men, and fast. Quite frankly, this is a pretty big missed opportunity, especially because of all the pressure Kevin Feige and Disney itself has put on the movie, consistently touting how big of a movie it is and its importance to the direction of the MCU. You'd think trying to combine elements of Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Thor Ragnarok together might create something interesting, not something bland and uninspired. The dullness speaks to the factory-produced, production line nature of these films. I mean, this one even tries to get Bill Murray to be the funny, cool Jeff Goldblum guy from Thor Ragnarok. But even he's just phoning it in.
And now the plot of Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantamania.
The movie starts out with a flashback of Catwoman finding Kang when she was stuck in the quantum realm. We know this man is Kang.
Because you're a good little consumer and watched Loki first, right?
Then we switch to Scott, Mr. Ant-Man himself, who monologues to remind you how normal he is. And how crazy all this stuff happening to him has been, because he's such a normal guy, just a really relatable, average Joe, that's all. Totally normal, just a typical guy. Just really normal. So normal. You connect with this character. I'm so normal. Please relate just an average guy. So normal. I'm so normal. Go football team. Scott's gone the route of every washed-up rock star ready to publish their memoir and is selling a book about his time as an Avenger. He drives the point home at the end of the book that he just wants to be a dad to Cassie. And you can't forget that name. It's spoken 476 times in this movie. But she's been a real silly goose lately and getting into trouble with the law. She's mad at him because he left the house for milk one day and didn't come back for years. Twice.
I know how to take care of myself, okay? Trust me, I'm pretty good at it by now.
Ouch.
And he's not doing anything with his life, according to what a teenager considers doing something with your life.
And what do you do now? Sign books?
Okay, fine, whatever. If that's your character arc, at least we have one.
I literally saved the world.
Oh, did you? Well, yeah, you never mentioned that before. Everybody's got saved the world.
How was that for you, Scott?
Oh. They're bantering playfully and making light of it. If they were ice skating, they'd try and jump the hilly brush together. Guess that arc's not gonna happen. Apparently, Cassie's an actual genius because of course she is.
Your daughter built a subatomic Hubble telescope in a basement.
And the magic MacGuffin she's built obviously malfunctions so the plot can happen and they get sucked into the quantum realm along with some ants and then they get split up. And that's in the first 5 minutes. Scott and Cassie are captured by some wacky quantum residents while Catwoman, the Wasp, and Michael Douglas stand against the worst CGI background of the entire film following the B-plot, which is a scavenger hunt. No, really, that's how it goes. They find the thing to contact the guy who brings them transportation so they can go talk to another guy. Exciting, huh? Back to Scott and Cassie. You know her name's Cassie, right?
Cassie.
They're hanging around not knowing what the fuck's going on when Goo Guy arrives. Goo Guy is the coolest character in the movie who has a suspicious obsession with bodily orifices, and his lack thereof in particular.
A big hole. How many holes do you have? I'm sorry, is that a personal question? I don't have any holes.
He puts his goo into Paul Rudd's mouth, and Paul Rudd's like... But then he realizes he can understand what everyone's saying now. I actually really like this. It got a snicker out of me. Just to have it ruined when an unfunny character shows up to pee in the lemonade. The guy's a real knee slapper with his delivery, like this zinger.
Could you please stop thinking that?
Sorry.
Please stop
Thinking?
Thinking that.
Nothing like the tried and true, the dude who reads minds saw something dirty gag. Delivered as well as a FedEx box during the holidays to fill you up with giggles. Catwoman, Wasp, and Michael Douglas arrive in generic Star Wars city ripoff, and both the ladies want to stay hidden, so they're wearing masks and hoods to disguise themselves. But Michael Douglas is like, fucking nope, and walks around flashing that goatee like a total Chad. They're here to get help from Bill Murray's cameo, but Bill Murray also says, fucking nope. And it turns out he's the king of Riz, and Michael Douglas is getting mind-cucked before our eyes.
Are you not human?
Not technically, but yes, in the ways that matter.
Anyway, so Rizzilla is actually trying to capture Catwoman and her gang so he can hand them over to Kang, obviously. But they escape with a plane that's piloted by goo. Lots of goo in this one. And nothing speaks to what a modern man is more than when Michael Douglas is totally cool with his wife cucking him for 30 years straight while he stayed celibate.
That guy?
I was down here for 30 years, Henry. I had needs.
I had dinner with someone a few times.
What went wrong?
She wasn't you, baby.
Catwoman tells the story of her meeting with Kang during her previous stay and that he's a bad dude. You know how she found out? Because she helped him rebuild his ship and then she touched it and it showed her all of his deeds. Yeah. Gives that memory store in Doctor Strange 2 a run for its money for best shitty plot contrivance, huh?
Play your significant memories now at a discounted price. We remember, so you don't forget.
Perhaps I treated you too harshly.
Also, it sounds like his ship is a fucking rat.
Gnawing, eating fucking rat.
Either way, she's seen all his dirty deeds, and she's like,
"You ain't no AC/DC, bitch."
And blows up his ship's power source. I mean, literally blows it up. Makes it big. Honey, I blew up the kid type of shit. Well, Kang sent his goons to kidnap Pistol Pete and Ant Kid. And Kang, speaking as if he's been constipated for a few days, tells Pistol,
Use spin particles on that fucking power source for me to shrink it down to normal size.
And Ant-Man's like,
Get fucked.
and Kang's like,
Nah.
and what do we know about Ant-Man?
Cassie.
That's right, so he agrees like a little bitch. Then there's this total douche sitting in the back just talking shit, and it starts to get annoying.
The Conqueror found me, rebuilt me, made me the ultimate weapon.
Well, moron, good for Happy Gilmore. Oh my God!
Oh my shit, how did I almost forget about the introduction of MODOK?
Look how they mess with my boy.
So Ant-Man goes down into the depths of the bloated out power source thing, and things start getting extra wacky and extra goofy because he starts duplicating himself like he's Michael Keaton in Multiplicity. In fact, it gets so overwhelming that he falls down an Ant-Man-y void. But he remembers the Obi-Wan Kenobi show and how goofy it was that after Vader trapped Obi under some rubble, he thought of Leia and that gave him the power to rise up. And Ant-Man's like,
"If it works for a Jedi, it'll work for me."
And thinks to himself,
Cassie!
and breaks free.
I'm coming, Cassie.
Also, we know that Kenobi should have been thinking about Luke, if anything, but we know Disney doesn't want you to care about him because he's a male. And Ant-Man can't do it on his own either because he's Ant-Man, but thankfully the plot remembers that the Wasp is in the title and she shows up to save the day because that's what always happens now. Then Michael Douglas sees MODOK and has the same reaction as I did.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
Kang gets his Powerball ticket, so him and Catwoman pick up a six-pack to celebrate in another part of the quantum realm. Michael Douglas finds Pistol and Jobin with the help of the ants that had fallen into the quantum realm with them, and there's a helpful montage with him getting signals in his comms device from the ants while they've been down there. That's right, instead of, say, showing this throughout the second act to build up to the uniting of the gang and the ants, it's just turned into an info dump. After Kang delivers some supposed to be taken seriously cringe dialogue that made me laugh at the movie,
I have lost. You have no idea what I have lost.
Cassie incites a revolt like Captain America did in Winter Soldier, and Pistol Pete shows up as Giant Man and delivers some of his own cringe dialogue that I laughed at.
Kang! We had a deal! You took my daughter!
Just a reminder, the first line was supposed to be dramatic, and the second one triumphant. So the Revolution shows up to help them take on Kang, and the CGI NPCs that exist to die at the hands of the bad guy CGI NPCs, well, they die. But at least we get the best scene in the movie because of it.
I have holes.
That's right, suspiciously orifice-obsessed goo guy gets his own holes, and what power they have. Kang is absolutely P-fucking-O'd about all this, so he starts turning people into gravy, and Giant Man's like,
"Mer, you promised your word is strong like oak while I brought the chainsaw, bish."
And they fight, and it kind of looks like this. Oh no, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do it. Until Michael Douglas and his ants show up. And the ants dogpile on Kang. And it looks like when your mom makes her amateur videos. And MODOK shows up to help because he's not a dick. Oh yeah, I forgot about this scene.
Tell me what to be.
I don't know, just don't be a dick.
It's too late. Look at me. I'm such a dick.
This is shit! This is a table of shit!
MODOK dies for his efforts, but I doubt he'll be staying dead because I absolutely hate what they've done with the character, so more than likely he'll be back. And it's the multiverse, baby. There are no stakes or consequences. That's what makes it so Good. Anyway, yay, Kang's defeated and the plot decides they can go home now. With just Ant-Man left to walk through the portal, surprise, I'm Michael Myers, bitch, the killer's not dead. And Kang and Pistol Pete duke it out one last time, mano-y-mano. But wait, there's a threat that Scott might get stuck in the quantum realm or even die. But Wasp shows up to help because the movie remembered her name was in the title again, and they defeat Kang. But no, the portal closed behind her. She made such a sacrifice. Oh, they opened it again. Never mind. Paul Rudd leads us out of the movie with another monologue, reminding you one last time what a normal, relatable, average Joe he is. I'm so normal. I did my taxes. Wow, that coffee's expensive. I'm so normal. Average Joe. My IQ is the number right before slow. Relate to me. So average. Always missionary. I like baseball. There's the story of Ant-Man 3. Now, let's get into it here. First and foremost, like I said, the script is nothing but a boring, bland, generic fare. It meanders from situation to situation with absolutely no help from the banal special effects, and it makes everything seem like it's running at a sludgy pace. I was wondering why the movie felt so goddamn long. I honestly thought the movie was at least 2 hours and 40 minutes when I was leaving the theater, so I was pretty surprised to find out it was only 2 hours. So what went wrong? Well, how about that pacing? From my perspective, the movie was completely off balance because of its act structure. Stories are typically split up into 3 acts. Sometimes there are disagreements on exactly when and where an act might end and the next one begins, but from my POV, in this movie, the first act lasts only 5 or 6 minutes, while the second act is at least an hour and 10 minutes, with the final act pulling up around 45 minutes. What the fuck? The middle mark of the film made it feel like it had been dragging because, in some ways, it had. And story elements that could have made the film feel a little more alive were just buried in the wrong spots. Like the situation with Michael Douglas and the ants. Why didn't they just show him trying to communicate with someone throughout the movie? The same result could happen. You could have just showed it to the audience and not have him talk about it. Good old show don't tell. But we, the audience, could infer it had something to do with the ants, who we knew would have to show up at some point, and it could build to it. It's not revolutionary, but that sort of thing gives more life to a story. With good ideas shoved into the wrong spots in the story and the act structure all fucked up, the foundation of your film is already shit. And where are the character arcs? There's Cassie's that they started and abandoned in a matter of 45 seconds, and yeah, Scott loves his daughter. He loved her at the beginning and loves her at the end. Fascinating. And come to find out, this was written by the same guy who's writing Avengers Kang Dynasty. So buckle up, folks, because after seeing this, my faith in an MCU redemption via an Avengers movie has been shaken to its core. But whatever, right? As long as the characters are compelling, we can bridge this gap. So it's too bad there isn't an engaging character in sight. Let's start off with Jonathan Majors, who's the most praised piece of this movie. Guys, what the actual hell? Jonathan Majors is a good actor, so I'm blaming this one on the script, but Kang is fucking cringe. The dude talks like he's on a date and struggling to hold in a fart. Majors is trying to play it like he's forcefully disarming. In some moments of dialogue delivery, he almost reminded me of Michael Clarke Duncan's brilliant performance in The Green Mile as John Coffey. He gives off a feeling that he's experiencing mental anguish, but he speaks softly and gently in some sort of painful politeness. Except brilliant isn't how I describe Kang's version of that. It comes off as completely silly, and I just see an actor acting instead of a character. I shouldn't have expected anything but praise, though, from everyone else. He was already getting praise when he was hired, so I guess it's another one of those situations where you're supposed to say something is good. And Michael Douglas doesn't seem to be acting in the same movie as everyone else. There were a handful of times during the film that I thought he really needs to just stop acting. You're old. You're done. Even Clint Eastwood stays behind the camera now. And Evangeline Lilly's presence is completely wasted, even though she's in the title. Man, Disney, you guys can't get anything right lately, can you? I honestly forgot she was there even when she was on the screen. The girl who plays Cassie has acting chops on par with Kristen Stewart and almost looks like her too, so, take all that as you will. And Paul Rudd? What a waste of this man's talent. He has a couple lower key jokes that land, and they were clearly his contribution to the movie in those moments. So what are you doing with this script? Let Paul Rudd it up. Now, the special effects, as mentioned, are total chud. I mean, it is an MCU movie after all, but this time around I'm a little surprised because of the tech they supposedly used. The filmmakers utilized the same technology The Mandalorian revolutionized to give a real background, but it just looks like complete shit and nothing better than what they've done in the past. Honestly, it's Spy Kids 3D level quality. There's even a meme pointing it out. Not only did it not look convincing, it was also just boring. How many times have you seen a completely interchangeable landscape from the last landscape you saw in an MCU movie? At some point, AI cloning technology will be good enough to to put a replica of whatever actor on the screen, voice and all, and then you can have actors play those roles indefinitely and just compensate them through royalties. Although, considering where tech is now but what Disney gives us on screen, they'll still look as good as Agent Smith CGI in The Matrix Revolutions. This is the problem with effects. CGI complaints have been rampant for years, but they're always forgiven because of compelling characters. When you don't have that, you kind of start looking at your surroundings more and becoming a little less forgiving.
The multiverse.
This probably deserves a dedicated video, but Ant-Man 3 further illustrates the problem with multiverse movies. They can be done well, everything everywhere all at once, but that movie had engaging characters that gave us some grounding. Sound familiar? In the MCU's multiverse, you don't get that, and you also don't get any sense of what's at stake. Instead, you have a feeling that nothing is important because anything can happen. One thing is bigger than another, which is bigger than another. Remember when they showed the Infinity Stones in a desk drawer in Loki, and it just gave you a really negative feeling because it makes the thing you were invested in the last 10 years completely unimportant and meaningless?
How do you have these?
Oh, we actually got a lot of those. Yeah, some of the guys use them as paperweights.
Well, nothing's changed. My favorite part of the debacle that is Ant-Man 3 is the real-world consequences of its reception. Ant-Man 3 was supposed to kick off Phase 5, and its importance was announced across the heavens. Kevin Feige has acted like a politician the last couple years, putting out fires over the lukewarm reception and underperformance of his Phase 4 slate, telling us how happy he is with the products and how successful everything's been. Meanwhile, he's trying to retool things on the fly behind the scenes to satiate people, like bringing Hugh Jackman out of retirement for one last ride as Wolverine. And oh wow, what a shocker. As soon as Ant-Man 3 gets a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes and a B Cinema score, Kevin Feige, that opening day, announces a delay for the Marvels and a shrinking down of its Disney Plus slate with some projects already in production now being placed on indefinite hiatus. Gee, it's almost like the oversaturation of the market with piss-poor product that your own audience has been telling you is a terrible idea was a terrible idea. How strange that people would rather see Spider-Man and Fantastic Four than fucking Ironheart and Agatha Harkness. And if you somehow think a B Cinema score is good, I assure you it's not. Cinema scores poll opening day audiences. These are the people that want to get out there and see it as soon as possible. The true fans. So in box office analysis, typically cinema scores mean this. A+ means A+, A means A minus means B, B+ means C, B means D. It's just how it is. Ant-Man 3 made me go back and watch an older MCU movie to see if I was just being nostalgic. I remember driving home gaslighting myself like, maybe the MCU was always shitty. But no, it was not. I can confirm this because the 11-year-old Avengers 1 that I watched is still awesome. Ant-Man 3 just sucks. And what a missed opportunity it was. Not that Ant-Man was going to save the MCU or anything, but with the breeziest, easiest character to make a movie with, they should have been able to provide a bit of a palate cleanser from the trash of Phase 4. I anticipated a relatively inoffensive film when it comes to quality, but they put so much emphasis on the film it completely collapsed under the pressure only Kevin Feige is responsible for burdening it with. In the end, you have an absolute nothing burger. There's no meat on the bones of this one. It's a fucking vegan burger is what it is. A corporatized, processed, boring product meant to be consumed and shat right out, and probably give you cancer. Good news. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the best the MCU has offered us in over a year and a half, but it's a seriously mixed bag that's overall quality hinges on what happens in 5 or 6 minutes out of a 2.5 hour film. Although that speaks to how great those 5 or 6 minutes are, it doesn't bode well for the rest of the movie. Chris Pratt returns as Star-Lord, and while he was trying to figure out his voice for the Mario movie last year...
Hey, where's the freaking gabagoo? You motherfucker. You motherfucker.
He managed to squeeze in filming his third outing as Peter Quill along with the rest of the gang almost 6 years after the release of Volume 2. Guardians 3 is tough to review, and I spent about 10 hours of my weekend discussing it on various YouTube channels. It's definitely not a bad movie, definitely not an amazing movie, but resting right on the definitely okay button. But damn, is it nice to have a proper movie to discuss like it used to be pre-Phase 4. There are extreme highs that offset some questionable choices, and a plot that's almost exclusively by the numbers. But James Gunn clearly loves these characters, and it was made by people who really give a shit, and that means something. It means they respect the audience, our investment, and Gunn did a good enough job giving these heroes a proper send-off, although the ending itself feels like an obligatory separation rather than anything making sense. With all that said, it's no Marvel savior. This film is so isolated from the rest of the MCU that its quality won't reflect on the greater Marvel IP. I don't think this will be tricking people into thinking the MCU has been restored after Phase 4 and Ant-Man 3 were complete disasters. The Guardians at this point feel disconnected, and I think people attending want to see what happens with their beloved heroes, and aren't worried about what interconnecting elements the film has with the greater MCU story, of which it has practically none anyway. I'm happy to say that unlike a lot of my MCU reviews over the last year, I'm not really going to shit on this movie. It simply doesn't deserve it because it's not shit. The mere fact I can spend my weekend on various podcasts discussing this without it becoming a slamfest is refreshing. The MCU isn't back, but at least there's a proper movie to break down. So thank you for that, Mr. Gunn. Let's start with the plot setup and understand where we are before we get to the criticisms and praise. We find the Guardians on Nowhere, which they had purchased from the collector during the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special on Disney+. They're trying to guard the galaxy from here, but their leader Star-Lord is still a mess after the loss and subsequent return of Gamora from another timeline. Adam Warlock, who we last saw at the end of Volume 2 some 6 years ago, comes careening out of nowhere to attack them, mortally wounding Rocket before being incapacitated by Nebula. The Guardians fix their wounds thanks to the introduction of some crazy medpack thing that instantly heals or repairs fucking anything, which sure would have been nice if they had those for Tony Stark at the end of Endgame, but they can't heal Rocket because he has a kill switch on his heart, which apparently prevents anyone from helping him if he's wounded. The kill switch was put there by his creator, which means instead of having an automatic kill switch to just kill him if he ever escaped, it's more of a troll. But this is the inciting incident to set up the story of the whole movie. The Guardians are on a mission to save Peter's best friend, Rocket Raccoon, with Nebula enlisting her sister Gamora to feed her into the gears of the story too. Let's start with the positives, which already tells you it's a cut above recent MCU movies that had almost no redeeming qualities. This film actually has some good stuff amongst its cinematic brethren, like it's at a party it wasn't invited to.
Sherman! Hey! What the fuck are you doing here?
The biggest thing working in this film's favor is the flashback scenes fleshing out Rocket's origin, which becomes the emotional crux of the entire film. These scenes are heartbreaking and have the most satisfying payoff I've felt in some time. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying a lot of these scenes were extremely impactful and can damn near bring a man to tears. The voice acting in these scenes by Bradley Cooper is off the charts, and it's undoubtedly his best outing as Rocket Raccoon. He brings a vulnerable element to Rocket we've never heard before, and there's a moment in particular that is absolutely gut-wrenching thanks in no small part to Cooper's contribution. The flashbacks make the movie, which is also a criticism, but I'll save that for the moment. For Chris Pratt, playing the role of Star-Lord helps shoot him into the stratosphere, and he caps off his trilogy in rousing fashion. I'll admit, there are times when I thought he was phoning it in, but I watched the movie twice, and after my second viewing, I feel it suited the character and where we find him at the beginning of the movie. There's a scene in the trailer where you see him screaming in emotional agony, and not to give away what it is, but his performance in that moment matches Bradley Cooper's in being simply excellent. He said he'd welcome coming back as Star-Lord, and I'd be more than happy if he did. Chikwadi Iwuji, who plays the High Evolutionary, is also a great actor playing a good villain. I still like Baron Zemo as my favorite MCU villain, but the High Evolutionary ranks pretty high on the list. He chews up the scenery a little too much sometimes, but the character itself is a pretty cool concept, with an actual explanation for his powers, instead of magic bullshit powers that have no defined limit or rules. I can already see Marvel trying to figure out how he's a Kang variant so they can replace Jonathan Majors. The B-plot of the film is dealing with Peter and Gamora, and it's another thing I have to praise. Remember how the Loki show had a scene where it brought the 2012 Loki up to speed so that we as the audience were basically made to accept him as the same old Loki we'd always known, even though he's not since the real one died at the beginning of Infinity War? James Gunn doesn't play that stupid game here. The film deals with the fact this isn't the same Gamora, and we see Quill having to deal with it and accept that fact. I was really scared after seeing Loki that Guardians 3 was just going to be about Quill getting Gamora back, or we just see her insta-accept who she's meant to be in some contrived bullshit way like the Loki show did, but thankfully that's not the case here. I want to compliment the CGI too, which is finally on point. VFX have been criticized out the asshole when it comes to the MCU since Phase 4 began, and rightfully so. It's been absolutely atrocious. And that is not the case here at all. It's like Marvel understood Guardians as one of their top tier properties, so best not fuck this up, and poured plenty of resources into it to make this film look absolutely beautiful. I don't blame the VFX departments of other MCU films. It's a known fact that they are overworked with the absolute deluge of garbage Marvel has made them pump out. But it seems like the teams working on this one were allowed plenty of money and resources to produce an absolutely stunning product. Everything from the sets, background CGI, and wild-looking creatures are stunning and believable. James Gunn was also allowed to get away with some serious body horror in this movie. He directed the films Slither and Super before moving to major blockbusters with the original Guardians film, and those movies had some gory elements, and it seems like Marvel really let him get away with some extra horrific stuff here. For some folks, it might be a little too much, especially if you're bringing kids to see this, but a huge kudos to Marvel for letting Gunn do his thing. The mood of the movie is pretty damn somber despite its comedic beats that have become a hallmark of the Guardians franchise. With that said, I'm pleased with the mood of the finale, and it really suits our heroes, and the tone matches that of the other films in the trilogy. It's hard to say I'm satisfied with the send-off, but I suppose that's another thing that comes with a caveat that I'll get to. No matter what, James Gunn loves these characters, and it's apparent to anyone watching. There's no cynicism or malice or disdain here that you feel some of the other MCU films have. Like Taika Waititi treating Thor like a complete idiot, or the bastardization of Doctor Strange in his own film, sidelining him for some newbie character. Criticisms are up next, but on a positive note, this film was made by people who care, and it's apparent. The message of the film is compassion and friendship, and Gunn does his best to showcase those things and succeeds most of the time. I'm done with the praise, so let's get into the criticisms, which there are many, and let's get right to the point. The best part of the movie is the flashback scenes, and it also feels completely separate from the rest of the film. They are dropped in almost randomly, or when Gunn feels like there's a decent enough break from the main story. And while they exist to help bolster the theme of friendship, particularly how important friendship is to Rocket, it unintentionally serves to undermine what should have been the main focus, his and Quill's friendship. Despite the tacit connection to the main story, it feels so disconnected that I almost wish it was its own separate thing because it absolutely has merit. I mean, shit, it's the best thing in the movie. Maybe it would have worked better if it was its own Disney Plus special, perhaps. Because outside of these flashback scenes that have no real impact on the main story, the movie feels like an absolute by-the-numbers chore. A main character is injured, so we have to have a MacGuffin chase to save them that brings us to point A, to point B, to point C. And those points are uninspired and pretty bland. The OrgaCorp scene that makes up the bulk of the second act is just a side quest, followed up by another side quest to Counter-Earth that practically serves the exact same purpose. Remove the flashback scenes, and this movie almost feels entirely like an extended cut of that shitty space casino scene in The Last Jedi. Just a giant-ass side mission. The final act feels like a Guardians movie, and there's emotional weight there that's actually between our main characters. Although this movie is absolutely riddled with fake-out death after fake-out death that left me feeling numb inside. There are constantly moments where a character actually feels like they're about to eat shit, and it's just boy who cried wolf after a certain point, yet James Gunn plays it up each time. I swear, there's a fake-out death for every single lead character in this, and it became obnoxious after this epic tragic scene that takes place, and then the very next moment the character's fucking fine. If you remove the entire OrgaCorp scene, this film would play out exactly the same. Yet it takes up a massive chunk of the film. The flashbacks set up the climax with the High Evolutionary, and they are the best parts of the movie. So if we kept those and removed the OrgaCorp section, it would free up the movie to do what it's trying to tell us, showing Rocket and Peter being best friends. The film tells you they're best friends, but how often have you seen them interact? And I mean really. In Guardians 2, Rocket is away from the group half the movie. In Infinity War, he goes with Thor and Groot. In Endgame, Quill isn't back until the final scene. Where have we seen these two characters be best friends? We just rely on the screenplay telling us they are. It would have been nice to remove almost half the movie, keep the flashbacks, and spend the extra time that frees up actually showing us the characters interacting that we want to see together. Because what we get is Rocket spending almost the entire movie incapacitated. And spoilers, so skip if you haven't seen it, Rocket's love, Lila, tells him when he's about to enter the afterlife that he has to go back. We've firmly established how much Rocket loves his lost animal friends at this point in the movie, and instead of, say, Rocket hearing Quill's voice and deciding to go back, he's told to by someone else, completely undermining Star-Lord and Rocket's friendship. This leads to my complaint about the ending, where each character kind of goes their separate ways out of what feels like obligation because this is the final movie, so they can't stay together because why wouldn't we keep seeing the Guardian stories if they did? After all this talking about how Rocket's his best friend, it didn't sit well with me that Peter decides to go back to Earth to see his uncle, someone he's never mentioned or given a shit about before until midway through this movie to set up some contrived reason to leave. Maybe it's just me, but if my friend was hurt and I went across the galaxy killing hundreds of creatures and stopping yet another world-ending villain to save their life, I'd never want to leave their side. Speaking of which, there have been some talks about how this film thankfully doesn't deal with massive high-stakes threats, and it's a more intimate story. Sorry, no, that's not the case. In fact, the High Evolutionary destroys an entire planet, killing millions if not billions of people. Not what I'd call low stakes. And I also found it hilarious the Guardians didn't even give two shits about it or even have a passing line about how awful that might have been. Fuck it, why not?
I will say this,
why not? Yeah.
I will say this, that one of the main complaints a lot of people have had about Phase 4 and now Phase 5 is the multiversal stuff, the fact that nothing's seen. What does it matter for,
Agreed.
you know? This one did dial it back in pretty successfully to us caring about something that wasn't a multiversal threat.
Yeah.
So I will at least give it that it was able to make you care about a much smaller scale story.
A planet was destroyed with millions of people on it. The Guardians didn't give a flying fuck either. I was just like, oh shit, good thing we weren't on that.
That may be the greatest comeback ever. Like that.
Adam Warlock is also completely fucking wasted in this movie, and interviews with James Gunn kind of allude to the fact he didn't want to include him and was kind of forced to.
Because I know fans have been asking you for years, even before Guardians 2, when you get the tease, like, what's going on with Adam Warlock? Did you feel pressure to put him in? And, like, how close to what the final product is what you had in your head?
I did feel pressure to put him in. I wrote a lot of the stuff was written for Volume 2. Originally, Adam Warlock was in Volume 2.
Mm-hmm. You can see what Marvel actually thinks of characters by the way they adapt them. Adam Warlock is an ultra powerful and kick-ass character in the comics, and he led the battle against Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. Essentially, the role Captain Marvel ended up taking over for the Infinity War Endgame saga for obvious reasons. So what do we get? A character that wouldn't change the story at all if he were removed or replaced by someone else. And they've turned him into a complete dumbass to boot. Yes, there's a story reason for why he's so stupid, but that doesn't make him not stupid. He's stupid and shouldn't be. There's also an overindulgence in the licensed music department with this movie. There are 17 fucking songs in this film. I counted 4 licensed tracks played in the first 18 minutes of the movie. It's like Gunn thought because this is his last Guardians flick, he needed to shove everything he could in here, appropriate or not. Despite the kick-ass music selection, it just becomes noise at some point. Literally too much of a good thing becoming obnoxious and less special with every song played. With each positive end of the movie having an unfortunate negative, it's weird to think about what would happen if you took out certain things. The first act is Adam Warlock completely wasted with a contrived reason to keep Rocket out of the movie. The second act is a treasure hunt, paint by numbers and boring, and the best part of the movie is the flashbacks. So does that make it a good movie? With some highs that are accompanied by some serious lows, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is an A-OK conclusion to the story of our galactic heroes. Tell me if you've heard this one before. The latest offering from the Marvel Cinematic Universe is complete and utter trash. Sound a bit like a broken record? Well, believe you me, noble viewer, it saddens me to say it every time, but reality is reality. By the time you get to Nick Fury making out with a Skrull, the cringe factor will make you go full McConnell. Secret Invasion, the newest addition to the 5 million MCU-related television shows dumped onto Disney Plus over the past couple years, is a waste of time, money, and talent that you won't regret ignoring. And by the looks of the viewership numbers, it seems like a lot of you did just that. For those who have watched it, Secret Invasion has proven to be one of those few times a year when everyone unites in hating the same thing. There doesn't appear to be any defenders of this show. It's being universally derided, and rightfully so. It joins the ranks of Velma and Peter Pan and Wendy as pieces of media that brought together the right, left, center, up, down, and sideways to crap all over a terrible product in unison. If there's one positive thing to take away from Secret Invasion, it's that. While the director employs the standard Disney deflection by blaming the fans for actually expecting the show to not be a piece of shit, the show fails on nearly every level except the acting. The sad part about the series is that the actors are giving everything they have, doing what they can with what they're given. There are a number of moments with Samuel L. Jackson where he has that old Nick Fury charm, infused with his Sammy J-isms that make you crack a smile from time to time. And like most Marvel productions, the supporting cast is filled out with top-notch actors. It's the script, concept, and execution that absolutely fails them at every turn that makes the whole thing just sad to watch. The very premise of the film is completely messed up from the start. It's supposed to be a spy thriller, but there is absolutely zero intrigue in this boring-ass show. Secret Invasion was originally an event and crossover series in Marvel Comics, and the show botches every aspect of that series that made it memorable and fun. The conflict that's set up to get the story moving is also just absolutely ridiculous and disregards so many events, scenarios, and places from past Marvel movies that would have solved everything in a millisecond. And all of this is horribly executed with a script that tells you everything that's about to happen before it does. So any potential tension is absolutely crushed. Character motivations are also beyond idiotic, and editing and effects that will make you cringe. The MCU will never live down the laugh-inducing Drax arm on poor Emilia Clarke. Before we dive into the sad details of this utter failure, the plot boils down to this. Nick Fury is a broken-down old version of the Fury we once knew and loved. Skrulls, shape-shifting aliens who were introduced in the Captain Marvel movie, and you'll be forgiven if you've forgotten about that, are living on Earth waiting for Fury to find them a new planet to live on. Well, some of them have just gotten real impatient that he hasn't done that, and one of them named Gravik has decided to ignite World War III because Fury hasn't kept his little promise. So after humans are wiped out, the Skrulls will take our place and make Earth their permanent home. That story setup will probably tingle the suspicions of any discerning viewer. That sounds awfully stupid, you might say. Well, you'd be 100% correct. But there's a problem before we even get to the plot issues. The show failed to deliver on its premise of being a spy thriller. Secret Invasion was supposed to be a return to glory, so to speak, the glory of Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is still one of the best of the MCU and honestly just a great movie in general. Winter Soldier was a spy thriller. It moved at a rapid-fire pace, taking a lot of inspiration from the Jason Bourne films, staying as grounded as possible for a movie about a lead with superpowers and keeping the audience guessing. In Cap 2, the government, and specifically S.H.I.E.L.D., had been infiltrated by Hydra, and it played up the paranoia, keeping Captain America and the viewer wondering who was and wasn't part of the conspiracy. This is exactly how Secret Invasion was being advertised and sold. A spy thriller, a show dripping with paranoia and subversion of expectations. Who would be a Skrull? Who was on our side? Considering where Captain Marvel left off, why would the Skrulls be turning against humans? This was supposed to be a show filled with mystery, intrigue, and revelations. Even the concept is a mirror image of Winter Soldier. Instead of Hydra having infiltrated all aspects of government and people close to Captain America, it's the Skrulls infiltrating positions of power and humans close to Nick Fury. And despite how terrible the MCU has been since Phase 4 started, with a couple notable exceptions, even I was still willing to give this one a chance. Nick Fury, especially as played by Samuel L. Jackson, is a beloved character. And returning to what worked in Winter Soldier, I was absolutely going to give this one a shot. Regardless of the setup, it couldn't even deliver on the most basic aspects of a spy thriller, let alone keep the audience guessing. In fact, it didn't even try. Some of the best moments of Winter Soldier were when Steve Rogers was uncovering secrets or having revelations dropped on him. Conversations between characters were filled with tense dialogue. The action set pieces we remember, the elevator fight, the knife and shield fight between Cap and Bucky, none of them would have mattered as much if they hadn't been set up so well by how the script handled its characters and their interactions. There was real build-up to those moments. Secret Invasion doesn't do anything like that. Instead of building tension, it completely telegraphs what's coming before a scene even starts. It can't even begin to subvert expectations, because you're just explicitly shown what a character is up to, told what their motivations are through boring exposition, and you are never guessing who is a Skrull and who isn't because you're just told or shown immediately.
Watch very carefully now. There it is. Let's see that again. Very, very disturbing.
The way to handle a mystery story is right there, and they drop the ball. Take the opening scene from episode 1, for example. You know who the Skrull is because it telegraphs it immediately before Martin Freeman's character begins interacting with the other actor in the scene. And they didn't have to do that. In fact, if the scene hadn't started with it basically telling us who the Skrull is, it could have been pretty tense because the way the characters are speaking, with them filled with their own paranoia, it would have kept the audience guessing. Instead, it's clear from the start that Martin Freeman is a Skrull right off the bat, and we just sit and wait for the scene to finish playing out. This happens constantly throughout the entire show. Any hint of nuance or subtlety seems like it was purposefully avoided, because that sort of thing is difficult to do, so they just ran with the most by-the-numbers plot possible, and hoped the action scenes and muted color palette would make you think this is a serious spy thriller. The show doesn't even allow you to guess who is and isn't a Skrull when it comes to heads of state. Within the first couple episodes, there's a scene where there's a meeting between people in positions of power and the villain of the show, Gravik, and they reveal themselves as Skrulls during that scene, so boom. There, now you know from here on out. No guessing, no ifs, ands, or buts, just here you go, viewer. Eat it up. Even the one revelation that should be shocking, and I'll get to why the choice to make this person a Skrull is terrible later in the video, when Rhodey is revealed as a Skrull, it's not even done within the confines of the story. It just shows him alone, getting out of the shower, and wiping a mirror, and you see a Skrull on the other side. No big reveal, no big revelation to Nick Fury, no tension, just completely wasted on a gimmicky shot. The best I can describe how lame this was is it's like the director hoped it looked cool, and that would be enough for us. The setups that the show does manage to get off the ground don't have payoffs. At first, it seems like Emilia Clarke's character, the daughter of Talos, was going to be a villain, but it's revealed quickly that she's helping her father, so whatever, I guess. There were so many things this show had going for it, and they fumbled the ball every single time. It's like a softball being thrown to an MLB batter at 50 miles per hour, and they swing and just fucking miss over and over and over. Outside the show not delivering on its promise to be a paranoia-infused spy thriller, let's get back to Nick Fury not keeping his promise, which is the foundation for the conflict in the show. In the 90s, Nick Fury promised the Skrulls that he'd find another planet for them to call home, but he and Carol Danvers hadn't been able to by the time the Avengers Initiative began, and then he unfortunately got blipped, and upon his return still couldn't find a planet for them. And while he was blipped, Talos had sent out a call to all remaining Skrulls, meaning there are at least 1 million of them living on the planet at this point. Gravik, the villain of the show, is pissed off that Fury hasn't kept his promise yet. He speaks for all Skrulls in saying that they want to be able to live in their own skin and not hide as humans. So he wants to incite World War III, have the humans destroy each other, then the Skrulls can rule the planet. If this sounds absolutely fucking stupid, it's because it is. Let us count the ways. First, let's look at logic and logistics. You basically have to erase most of what you've seen in the MCU from your memory in order for any of this to make sense. The superheroes of Earth are now friends with the Guardians of the Galaxy, so why couldn't they get their help in finding an uninhabited planet? Or why not ask if the Skrulls can live with them on Nowhere? Or hey, how about that planet Thanos was on at the beginning of Endgame? That was Earth-like and completely uninhabited. Seems like that would be a perfect spot, but the show constantly repeats lines regarding Nick Fury's failure to find a planet exactly like that. In addition, how is inciting World War III so that the Skrulls can rule the planet the logical step here? Because someone didn't keep their promise, the over-the-top villain wants to commit genocide and wipe out an entire species, 8 billion people, so that 1 million Skrulls can inhabit the Earth. The Skrulls have taken full advantage of the hospitality given to them by Fury, all of the wonders and cushy living brought on by first world countries, which requires the symbiotic relationship of billions of people to keep up. Instead, Gravik thinks it's a great idea to live in the aftermath of a World War III, a nuclear wasteland that would destroy anything and everything. That's way better than living on the Thanos planet from Endgame. And why is World War III the way to go? Infiltrating the highest forms of government across the world would have been more logical and far more interesting. That sort of plot would have given more opportunity for it to be the spy thriller it was advertised as, and there was already a blueprint with Hydra and Captain America Winter Soldier. But instead, just like the action, the show goes the generic route. Bad guy wants to wipe out mankind. Wow. Fascinating. And it does so in the most contrived, boring, mindless way possible. The premise and conflict of Secret Invasion are completely messed up and wasted, and these are two foundational elements for a story. If the foundation is crumbling from the get-go, you're in for a rough ride. And if any MCU fan got a whiff of this stank-ass fart of a concept before the show was out, there would have been major pushback. Maybe that's why MCU stories are kept under wraps, so Redditors and YouTubers don't make the writers look bad by providing better concepts. The only buzz from this show stemmed from Samuel L. Jackson leading the way, reprising his role as Fury, and that's completely bumbled too. There are flashes of brilliance with Jackson hamming it up, but that's few and far between and nowhere near good enough to recommend anyone watch this pile of trash. Just like the script going with generic beats, how the show utilizes Nick Fury is trope-filled, standard stuff you've seen 100 times when dealing with older characters. I can't remember exactly how many times Nick Fury is called old, or how many lines of dialogue there are saying that he isn't the Fury he used to be, but it's a lot. The script drives the point home over and over again that he's old and useless and can't do anything on his own, which is mind-numbing because that's not Nick Fury. Jackson's take on the character is lauded because the Fury of the past is ready for anything. He's 12 steps ahead of everyone, and whenever we thought he was down, he was actually up. He had a mystique about him that kept him interesting to viewers, and the decision to do the modern standard of deconstructing his character was a terrible decision. We've seen this done time and again, and it hardly ever plays out well. The only time I can think of where this worked was in Logan, but here we get the Luke Skywalker treatment for Fury. Fury. The MCU has utilized the character as a guiding force behind the scenes, and I think that's where Fury shines. Setting him as the lead of a TV show sounds good on paper, but the character works best in supporting roles. It's kind of like Hannibal Lecter. Most of the time, it's best not knowing much about him because he works best when he's shrouded in mystery. I don't mind Fury having a bit of a love story here in the series. Yes, it's executed terribly, but the idea isn't bad. But once it becomes a cornerstone of the show, it gets embarrassingly bad, and I wish they hadn't bothered. Once again, behold Nicholas Fury kissing a Skrull and cringe before your MCU overlords. Other players in the show don't escape character assassination, with Maria Hill literally being assassinated. The saddest part about that character is that she never really got to be one. What we knew about Hill was she was incredibly loyal to Fury, his right-hand man, or woman, and whenever she was on screen, it was comforting. Like Fury, she was used as a through line to unite different areas of the MCU, and whenever Fury popped up, you knew Hill was right behind him. Killing off a well-known or beloved character isn't and shouldn't be off limits. As long as it serves the story, I think most things are fair game. It's always in the execution. If it's done well, then it's done well. But Secret Invasion doesn't get much right, so how do you think they handled Maria Hill's death? She's unceremoniously killed off at the end of the first episode for shock factor, and that's pretty much it. The response from the 8 people who actually watched the show should be enough proof that they executed this poorly. No one complained that Tony Stark died in Endgame. It made sense, it was poetic, and it was well done. Here, the response to Hill's death was, really? That's what you chose to do? Whose death in the show doesn't come so much as a shock as it does obligatory. They do the same with Talos. His usefulness came to an end and they just have him die with no emotional weight behind it. But the person who gets the most aggressive shit end of the stick has to be poor Rhodey, and by proxy, the remaining fans of the MCU. Revealing Rhodey as a Skrull isn't the issue. It's the length of time it's suggested he's been one. In episode 6, it's heavily suggested that Rhodey has been a Skrull since the end of Captain America's Civil War. See, when the real Rhodey was found, he's unable to walk because he hasn't gone through rehabilitation since his injury at the hands of Falcon. This is all meant for shock value and nothing more. There's absolutely no regard for the ramifications of this revelation. So you mean to tell me that everything Rhodey's been through since Civil War hasn't actually happened to him? He hasn't actually experienced? So Rhodey doesn't even know that his best friend Tony Stark is dead. He doesn't know about Thanos or the blip. So the emotional weight of the scene where Pepper, Spidey, and Rhodey have to say goodbye to their loved one was actually Pepper, Spidey, and a random Skrull saying goodbye to Tony. This is worse than the scene in Loki when they decided to say Infinity Stones were just paperweights. It's a blatant disregard for the past, things the audience was emotionally invested in, for the sake of shock value. And this kind of writing is pathetically lazy and shows whoever wrote it gave absolutely no thought into what this sort of thing means. Out of everything wrong with Secret Invasion, this is probably the most egregious thing of all. The final episode received the worst overall rating of any MCU project ever, and for good reason. It's a cringe fest on every conceivable level, from writing decisions to the effects, editing, and even the acting. It's a pathetic excuse for an end to a $200 million plus project. The MCU has had some pretty abysmal moments, but they will absolutely never live down the shitfest that was the final fight between Gaia and Gravik. See, Gravik wanted what amounts to a serum that has all of the Avengers' DNA in it so he can inject all the Skrulls with it, turning them into Super Skrulls with all the powers of the Avengers. At random points in the fight, the combatants turn certain parts of their body into those of other heroes. Their arms become a tree like Groot's, or the hilariously idiotic looking part when Gaia turns her arm into Drax's, covered in tattoos and all, so apparently he was born with them. It's goofiness to an extreme. It gets so ridiculous that when they turn an arm into Ebony Maws, who is one of Thanos' Black Order in Infinity War, it has the rings on his fingers. I guess just like Drax was apparently born with tattoos, the ring on his hands are part of Maws' DNA. So what exactly would they be getting with Tony Stark's DNA, for example? Not just his intellect, but his armor? Maybe with Cap, they'd get his shield? It's beyond illogical and just makes you shake your head in acknowledgement that a once great franchise has sunk this low. MCU movies were never highbrow entertainment, but this is beyond ridiculous and any suspension of disbelief has been completely killed off. like we're an MCU side character at this point. And we're left with Gaia, played by Emilia Clarke, as the most powerful hero in the MCU. And the hilarious part is I'm sure we'll never see her again, because she's not signed on to more MCU projects, so just like no one has mentioned a giant celestial sticking out of the earth after the events of Eternals, this whole thing will be forgotten as well. As the MCU expands, it's getting more and more difficult to keep track of everything and make sure there aren't any logic gaps. But when fans point this out, it's shocking to realize the writers didn't think of major events or how certain things contradict past ones. The only conclusion you can come to is that they simply don't care. Secret Invasion is an adaptation in name only. It takes the name of a beloved crossover event from the Marvel Comics series, and that's pretty much it. Now, that's not a terrible thing in practice. Captain America Civil War was an adaptation of the Civil War comic book event, and they couldn't be more different in terms of size and scope. The comic books had hundreds, if not thousands, of characters to work with, so the storyline took place on a massive scale, even involving other dimensions. At the time, the MCU wasn't nearly as broad, so it was a much smaller story. But what it had going for it was the main characters were the same in both the comic book and movie versions. Cap and Iron Man were the big players, and Spider-Man played a role in both. The movie also did a great job of keeping the heart of the conflict front and center, so even though it wasn't even close to a one-to-one adaptation, it still felt like Civil War. Secret Invasion doesn't do that at all. The TV show isn't anything like the comic book in any way. Major players in the comic are heroes who are either dead or retired in the MCU, so the only thing similar to the comic is the title. For something that's supposed to be an Earth-ending level threat, the show feels decidedly small scale too. Nick Fury continent hops, but it just feels inconsequential. I understand bringing Chris Evans back or having any major cameos would be cost prohibitive, but it makes me question where that massive budget went then, because the effects don't look top dollar by any stretch, and the cast isn't filled with exclusively A-listers or anything. This sort of thing means any Skrull revelation would be of characters we don't really care about, which would mean the writing would have to be extremely strong to make up for the lack of true aha moments, which it fails to do at every turn. Maybe the saddest part of the Secret Invasion debacle is that the director of the show has gone on the defensive. I simply don't understand this strategy, but Disney isn't alone in doing it, where a writer, director, actor, or even studio head will come out and not just defend a poorly received product, but will actively attack the fans that pay their bills. How many times have you heard someone from Hollywood come out and tell you it's the fans' fault for why something failed? Remember the Bros situation earlier this year, when the writer-director blamed straight people for why his movie bombed? How many times has a show or movie blamed racism, misogyny, or whatever other buzzword for its failures and bad ratings? Well, Secret Invasion joins the club. Thankfully, this time around, it's not culture war related, but the director of Secret Invasion had this to say. Oh, I don't read reviews, with all due respect. For me, I view all the storytelling work I do as a dialogue with the audience. I don't know, is it our job to fulfill their expectations? To answer your question, yes, it is your job to fulfill expectations. He's painting this with a broad brush, like we expect X and Y from a story every single time. And that couldn't be further from the truth. What people expect is that a show isn't a complete piece of shit with blatant disregard and disdain for the things that came before it. The things that came before it are the reason people are watching it. People also expect to be given what is promised. If you say the show is a spy thriller engulfed in paranoia, and then you don't deliver that, what else would you expect as a response? This sort of narcissistic, mind-numbing dialogue is why a lot of people don't give a shit whatsoever that most of Hollywood is on strike. The level of ego and ignorance spewing out of the people producing shitty work is sickening, and people get fed up with it. The attacks from Hollywood make it seem like these things are just free, and we should take what we're given and say thank you. Well, a movie ticket costs about $15 now, and people pay for a monthly subscription to a streaming service. This is a consumer-based society, and people have to pay for these things. If they don't like what they pay for, they have every right to say so, and also every right to move on to something worth their time. No one owes Hollywood anything, and it's high time these people get their head out of their collective asses and gain some humility. That'll be the day, huh? Holy shit. Shocker, The Marvels is exactly what everyone thought it would be. A disaster in nearly every conceivable way a Hollywood production could go wrong. It's a film that's been blatantly mutilated in the editing room and has become something of a Frankenstein's monster of a movie. I saw it compared to the theatrical cut of Justice League, and yeah, I can see that. That's how rough it gets. It's so poorly paced and edited, it's like the movie can't wait to get this over with. It comes off like it's embarrassed of its own existence. Performances from most of the experienced actors on screen are flat and uninspired. The dialogue is embarrassing. Characters' choices come off forced or contrived, the lead characters' backgrounds are underdeveloped, and the chemistry between the actors is okay at times, but the characters themselves are never worthy of our admiration or emotional investment. It exists because it must. For the MCU machine and Disney Financial clearly said it's not worth the tax write-off, or the embarrassment to the company to shelve it. So delay until it finally has to hit theaters. This is as vacuous as it gets. The film itself was something the studio clearly had no faith in after its conception. Multiple delays and reshoots for various reasons cemented it as a troubled production, and you can see it, hear it. And there's a point in the movie where it's so shitty you can almost smell it. Or maybe that was the one other guy in my theater, I really can't be sure.
Between the anchovies and the garlic, my breath's gonna smell like Ursula's box.
There's a point where Brie Larson's wig is so apparent, you question if any of the film you've watched is from the first shoot, or if it's entirely built off the multiple reshoots. And to top this disastrous production and year for the MCU, The Marvels is going to be the worst performing film in MCU history. You know those times when you were 100% certain about something? Something you knew so profoundly in the very core of your being that it gave you confidence to speak as freely as you wanted? The anticipation for the I told you so moment building, and you sit back and smile just waiting for it to arrive. Well, that moment is here, as The Marvels finally released in theaters after not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 release date changes.
Oh my god.
Or was it 5? You know what? Better question. Doesn't matter. Oh my, this just in, we have behind the scenes footage of Kevin Feige pitching the Marvels to Disney and how he's gonna make it.
Chicken placenta, Worcestershire. Whoever named this could go shit in a hat. A Bijan, microdose with some acid.
Alright, let's go over the story first so you can get an idea of where these criticisms will be stemming from. Obvious spoilers incoming, but I know goddamn well if you're here to hear me shit on this thing. So
let me talk to you!
Yeah, so basically Captain Marvel was responsible for a Kree civil war that left their planet Hala, like, kinda less habitable, I guess. So their current leader, who looks like a knockoff of Storm from the X-Men, is stealing all kinds of shit from other planets and galaxies like suns and water and atmosphere and what the fuck. I don't know, the apathy's already set in. This all happens against a horrendously obvious green screen that the actors are standing against. And it's a broken record at this point to mention how crazy it is that these films cost this much and look this bad at times. Pseudo-Storm finds a bangle in a space rock that is the matching bangle Miss Marvel has on Earth. What luck! A story commences. If anyone else besides Kamala and a handful of other people in the entire universe had that bangle, the multiverse would be doomed. Huh. Lucky that didn't work out any other way except the 1 in 10 trillion chance it did. Or everyone would be dead. At your convenience, film. Pseudo-Storm uses her new bangle paired with her hammer thing and rips a hole through space-time. During all this, Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Monica Rambeau switch places with each other if they use their powers, regardless of where they are in the universe, because reasons concerning light or some shit. These abilities, of course, happen at the movie's convenience a number of times. It happens when any of them use their powers, but then later in the film they figure out to use them at the same time to cause a switch. Again, at your convenience, movie. Pseudo-Storm shows up to another planet to steal its water to restore Hala. You know, as mentioned. That planet happens to be the Skrull refugee colony, and this lady can go anywhere with ripping holes through space-time, but decides to go here because she's, well, vindictive, I guess? It's like the Scarlet Witch thing. Why didn't Wanda just go to a universe where she wouldn't have to kill anyone to get her way? Assuming Pseudo-Storm doesn't know about the multiverse, it's still a galaxy, so why doesn't she find another planet not filled with refugees of her former adversaries other than pure evil intent? Is this a tragic character or a completely common, lowbrow, boring, base-level, I'm an evil person villain? You won't find a satisfying answer in the movie. Don't bother looking. I did it for you.
Brush your ass hairs.
So this is the part where Captain Marvel admits that she has a nickname concerning her being the destroyer of fucking worlds or some shit because she's responsible for multiple genocides. But who cares? She's the good guy, and she scrunched her forehead, eliciting empathy. Or at least I'm assuming that's how the AI told the ever-robotic Brie Larson what emoting was, and this was her first attempt at it, ever. Pseudostorm is off to another planet, and this is where the fucking musical number comes in. Alright, look. So everyone here on this planet communicates by singing. Unless they don't. And this is on par with the dance scene in Spider-Man 3 level cringe. I think Spider-Man 3's scene hurt worse because I'm such a Spidey fan, and I remember I was hoping for an amazing third film. But this one means more. This is the state we're in regarding the MCU, which is bigger than just one superhero, so it has bigger ramifications. Here's a short clip. Try not to bash your head off anything.
But nonetheless, we ring the bells to usher in who pretends.
Oh, hey, are you insane?
I think I could have done that better.
I thought it was good.
And now Pseudostorm wants Earth's sun to restore hers, and in the words of RoboCop,
we can't have that.
So the Marvels, as they call themselves, head on out to stop her at the behest of Nick Fury and Sword, and also just the general desire to not want everything on Earth to die. While traveling, they use a plot device that rivals the memory store in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in the magnitude of how contrived it can get, where they put headsets on to fill each other in, as well as the audience, on some quick boilerplate backstories for each character, to pretend like these are fully formed characters we should be emotionally invested in. There's a quick montage of them practicing using their powers in unison, and after that short session of practice, they've perfected it for the rest of the film. Shit, that couldn't have been easier. At your convenience, movie. They face off against not Halle Berry, and apparently Captain Marvel has the power to fucking regenerate a sun? What? Yet she struggles battling Pseudostorm with the help of two other superpowered beings. That is, of course, until she doesn't struggle against her. At your convenience, movie. Also, there's this unbelievably cringy point in the story where Nick Fury's base is going down, and to save the crew, the cat from the first movie named Goose has a bunch of kittens. But of course, these things aren't really kittens, and they eat all the people so they can actually fit in and transport everyone onto the last escape pod. Yes, that's a real description of a real thing that happens in the movie. The first Captain Marvel movie was heavily criticized for the cat thing involving Nick Fury, so let's not just double down on it, they said. Let's go supernova. Pseudostorm gets the other bangle from Kamala Khan after playing possum with Captain Marvel, and she can't handle the power, so she explodes. But not before ripping a hole through space-time again, this time in the multiverse. Even though fake Halle Berry couldn't handle the bangles, Miss Marvel totally can, and uses it to hit Rambo with it so she can close the portal from the other side, of course. She says something like, "I always knew I'd have to do it this way," even though this literally just happened. It's just a piss-poor line of dialogue to make sure the audience knew what was made obvious a moment prior when Monica said it had to be closed from the other side. Yet for some reason the characters are surprised when she does this, and Monica says it out loud for the audience just in case you didn't pick it up the first time she said it out loud. The MCU's writing has devolved to a point where they overplay and overemphasize what should be emotionally impactful moments for characters with dialogue instead, beating us over the head with what's right in front of us. Yet they'll keep things vague and undefined in other areas like powers, timelines, and basic character limitations. Absolutely amazing. So after this, Captain Marvel flies into Hala's sun and restores it. Yes, she fucking restores it, like no problem, boss. This character is so overpowered and boring, it's almost impressive in its futility. Miss Marvel meets Kate Bishop and asks her to join her Young Avengers squad, and I wasn't ready for what was next. Monica winds up on the exam table of Beast from X-Men in full comic book style CGI design.
That motherfucker back there is not real!
What struck me about this was how I scoffed instead of feeling excited. The way it plays out, it absolutely smacks of desperation, which is hard to ignore when it's finally being plastered all over mainstream media. Something I'll get to shortly here, but this reeked of desperation. It reeked of a studio changing the ending of a movie in the final hour in order to drum up excitement. A studio finally giving the audience exactly what it should have been all along. A studio finding out it's not invincible, that people don't just show up for the logo, that people demand quality of their movies that they're paying to see. Something I would have been excited about 3 years ago made me snicker instead and mock the studio for trying. I'm just one person, but judging by the box office figures, there are a lot of people who share my opinion. The Marvels is a film that barely registers as anything but pure consumer product, meant to be shat out at a moment's notice. It has no clear or consistent tone, and you'll get whiplash from it bouncing back and forth. This isn't even shocking, it was foreshadowed in its marketing. Originally meant to be a girl boss female empowerment movie, it was advertised as such and was a major part of the MCU's female propaganda piece. I mean, female empowerment half-hour special honoring the women of the MCU. But it looks like at some point in late 2022 or early 23, the studio heads finally figured out that they were in serious trouble. Oh, you know what it was? When Ant-Man Quantamania was destroyed by critics and it lost money in theaters. That was the eye-opener that whatever they were doing wasn't working, even though it was obvious to all of us, but, you know. So they shifted the release date and reshot again. The girl boss female empowerment angle wasn't really present, and the final product definitely was a film meant for everyone. The only problem is, it's a shitty film that's meant for everyone. Remember how tonally inconsistent 2016's Suicide Squad was? Or the theatrical version of Justice League? That's what this movie's like. Those films were also meant to be something else from their inception, and were changed via studio mandate at the last second, with Suicide Squad going from a dark and creepy action thriller to a wannabe villain version of the Guardians of the Galaxy. All with the same original footage, just done in the editing room, leaving a film that looks and sounds incoherent. Compare the first trailer of the Marvels to the last one. The last one pathetically used at least 20 seconds of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers to elicit some comparison between the Marvels team up and the Avengers. LOL. The Avengers had a consistent tone because it was made by a filmmaker with a clear vision. It utilized characters with unique and distinct sets of powers that had limitations and boundaries. And even though each character was larger than life and brought their own tone and personalities, the film had a consistent feel, look, and sound. The Marvels is nothing like that. The characters' powers are too ill-defined and bland to stand out from one another. 2 out of 3 of them wear similar costumes. And their powers are poorly defined and often feel virtually unlimited. If they're going for an Avengers tone, they missed it by a fucking country mile, baby. The editing leaves the pacing in shambles too. I have never watched the movie so short that felt so long. Weird because the movie moved rapidly. It clearly could not wait to get itself over with. If this movie was a living thing, it would kamikaze. But it's so boring and uninteresting you have to drag yourself to the finish line. And the editing contributes to the movie feeling so episodic instead of a feature film. It feels unimportant, with no satisfying conclusion, and also no tantalizing cliffhanger, despite the studio's last-second tag-ons and X-Men promises. And everyone seems so fucking bored, and who can blame them? We're probably watching the 40th take of the 5th reshoot of a scene wherever you are in the movie. Can you imagine the level of I don't give a shit they're probably feeling at that moment? Yeah, I know, most of them, especially Brie, are getting paid a lot of money, but I still almost understand. And when the actors on screen don't give a shit, why should the audience? Question to ponder, Kevin. Brie Larson gives a little bit more personality to Captain Marvel in some moments, and in others, she's worse than ever before. Her acting in a few scenes where she's supposed to be emoting is probably the worst work of her career. There's one scene in particular at the end of the second act that's genuinely terrible. Captain Marvel is a character the studio has apparently given up on, and so has Brie Larson. Carol Danvers is played as a blank stare that occasionally smirks, and is kind of like how Patrick Bateman describes himself.
I have all the characteristics of a human being. Flesh, blood, skin, hair, but not a single clear, identifiable emotion.
Yes, he has flesh, blood, bone. He comes off as a human like you, but he's simply not there. And neither is Brie Larson. Teyonah Parris is whatever as Monica Rambeau. Her one facial expression is apparently a perpetual state of surprise mixed with some worry. And I question what she can really do with this character. There's no depth here. Rambeau is pissed at Captain Marvel for abandoning her as a child, I guess. And I know this because it's the one thing the script uses in an attempt to make her an actual character and not just diversity superhero. Like honestly, what else am I supposed to say here? What is the depths of one Monica Rambeau? Is this a character that will have books written about her psychology? Or is this just a fucking poorly written character handed to an actor who's basically been given nothing to work with? In fact, most of these characters, including the villain, are undercooked and overserved. Captain Marvel has been in multiple films, yet she's completely underdeveloped as a character. Especially with the first film's character arc for her being that she realized she was superpowered and perfect all along despite all those dang men in her way. It's a low-effort smoke and mirrors job to create empathy, a lazy writing technique. And once they took that element away from her character in this new film, she's gotten even more boring. Iman Vellani does her best as Miss Marvel to bring some fun to the movie. She's trying her best, and I thought she was annoying in the trailers, but quite frankly, she's probably the best part of the film. Samuel L. Jackson is great as always as Nick Fury, but again with the complete inconsistencies. This Nick Fury is funny, smooth, and seems to be in control. That is not the Nick Fury we last saw in Secret Invasion just a few months ago. So when does this movie take place? Because this is a completely different character than the Fury in Secret Invasion. Also, it's a Marvel movie, so it goes without saying it looks like shit most of the time. The VFX are awful, and it's no fault of the artists considering the time constraints we know Marvel Studios put them under. I wonder how quickly they had to do that X-Men mid-credit scene, honestly. From an artist standpoint, I feel awful for the crew of people having to put out shoddy work because of a studio demand instead of something they're proud of. They're not alone, though. There are a lot of artists who worked on this movie whose work has been absolutely butchered, I'm sure. Because that's what the movie looks and sounds like, a hacked up mess. The exact result you'd expect to get from an oft-delayed, oft-reshot, oft-rethought production that the studio didn't even want to release. Something that would probably be too embarrassing for the company in the long term to shelve. Better to drop it and face the criticism and take the financial hit. WB got immense blowback for shelving the Batwoman movie. Imagine Disney trying to live down shelving the sequel to a billion-dollar original. Typically, with this kind of review, you'd hear cries of misogyny and yada yada. But look at the numbers. Disney is smart enough not to pull a WNBA and blame men for not showing up to the Marvels. No one is showing up to the Marvels. Marvel Studios and Hollywood as a whole can't deny the audience apathy with a victimhood shield anymore. Fans paying attention were aware of what was happening years ago. Congratulations, mainstream world. You caught up with the rest of us. GG's.